Some learning announcements.
Good morning, Yash.
Good morning, Rabbi Greene.
Year of Learning, sponsored by Julia and Boris Caton to commemorate the yahrzeit of Julia's father, Yisuf ben Madel.
Okay, good morning, everybody. This morning's topic is unfortunately very controversial because it's a very clear halachic position, and it's become very politicized in Israel. And I want to expand it a little bit into the rest of the world as well. The issue, of course, is the refusal of the Haredim to serve in the Israeli army. And it's become a political issue, but I'd like to examine it this morning in terms of a halachic framework. We try not to talk about politics here, talk about halakha. And clearly, as we'll see, there is no excuse for every able-bodied individual to serve in the army, regardless of what their occupation might be. And that includes Haredim. Unfortunately, it's become very politicized. So I want to examine that a little bit. During the Vietnam War, I happened to spend some time teaching about war in a halachic context. And I'm just amazed that it's only, even though the halacha is very clear, as we shall see, that everybody has to serve when Israel's security is being threatened. It's become only recently, because of the Haredi refusal to serve, much more of an issue. The truth is that this issue was raised a very, very long time ago. The Torah talks about war. He says, and the Torah suggests, recommends, that if you do have to go to war, it should be as passive as possible. Put a siege around another country or other enemy. Besiege them, don't actually attack them. However, if you are attacked, you have to, of course, fight back. And we go throughout Tanakh, whether it's Devorah, the Shoftim, whenever there was a need to go to war, because they were being attacked, Bnei Yisrael went, and everybody joined the army. There were certain exceptions. Now, there are two types of wars, and that's very, very clear in halacha. There are many complicated sugyos in halacha, but drafting every able-bodied man is not one of them, as we'll see. If you are in what they call a milchemet reshut, a non-obligatory war to expand the land, you want to attack another country to get more real estate. So there are exemptions. If you just got married, if you just planted a field, etc. If you are afraid of the sounds of war, ask any soldier who has been in war. It scars you for life. There's no question about it. War is hell. It's a horrible thing to see people blown up next to you, killed, whatever. But a non-obligatory war, an optional war, there are exemptions. But when the Torah tells you if you are attacked, every man on deck and women. Just hold on. I think it's a lot of things we've got to cover. Everybody has to serve. And the halacha is very clear. Even a chassan and kala from the yichud room have to go to war. Everybody. Nobody's exempt. Everybody has to go. Rachalevov doesn't count. It's very, very clear. And the person who discusses this in the greatest detail is the Rambam. Malachim. Every healthy Jewish boy, man, has to serve. The question that I'd like to raise today is to whether that obligation applies to all healthy young men and perhaps women who live in Chutz La'aretz. Do our sons and grandsons, starting at YU or Turo or working on Wall Street, are they obligated to fly to Israel to serve in the IDF right now? It's a serious shiloh. Short answer, probably yes. Probably, think about it. At one time, all the Jews lived pretty close together, one area. And there's even a devoter was critical of some of the Shvatim who didn't join in her wars. And sometimes people who were down south took them a long time to travel up north. But everybody lived in a general area in the Middle East. So when the Torah talks about the Jewish community being attacked and struggling for survival, then every Jew has to pitch in. Now, in the diaspora, Jews are spread all over the world. Does the halacha change? And the answer is no. Halachically, poskim have talked about it, the Rambam especially, others, as we'll get to in a moment. If Israel is threatened, and everybody, from the left to the right, agrees that the wars that Israel has been engaged in, whether it's Milchemet HaShiur, whether it's the Yom Kippur War, or it's a 6-day war, all the wars that these were all defensive wars. These were all defensive wars, and where Israel's very existence is threatened. And in that case, it's all hands on deck. And if American boys feel the obligation to serve, and they should, Israel will probably pay for their airfare. And not American boys, Canadians and the Europeans, South Americans. When the Jewish nation is threatened, Jews have to show up. That, I believe, is the halachic position that all major poskim follow the Rambam. Nobody argues with the Rambam. Not one single posek, bal halacha, argues with the Rambam. And all of the reasons that are given by the Haredi community are not based on halachic understandings of that particular position. They're mostly agaritas and midrashim. We talk about the role of the Leviim. Even among the Haredi Gedolim, Rav Velvel Soloveitchik, the Chazon Ish, in their halachic writings, they say, you got to go. But those aren't the ones that are being quoted to exempt them from serving in the army. Melchemet Mitzvah. And by the way, another important diuk to make, and again, this is all halachic pshat, very simple understanding. The Torah says, if a person is threatening your life, habol lahargacha, hashkem lahargo. If somebody's coming to kill you, you can kill them. As an individual, we're talking about the nation of Israel. Not if somebody's coming to harm the nation of Israel, you got to defend it. And these are all based on psukim. On and on and on. All the major posts can support the Rambam's position on that. You also, to the point that contemporary poskim in Israel, let's assume that a yeshiva boy from one of the what do they call that? Yeah, the yeshivas which send boys to Israel. Hesder, thank you. One of the Hesder yeshiva boys has finished his tour of his assignment for the night, right? He's been on guard duty from 9 o'clock until 3 a.m. and it's Shabbos. He finished his role. Is he allowed to walk back to camp on Shabbos, carrying his flashlight and his rifle and his weapons and everything else? It's Shabbos. He's no longer on duty. And the answer is absolutely. All the posts can talk about. In the same way that Hatzalah people can drive back home after they've gone to the hospital with somebody. Okay? These are very, very, again, these are halachic decisions. There's a fascinating halach. Ad kedei kach. Let's assume you have a female Shin Bet operative, a secret agent for the Israeli army, and she has connections with one of the Arab generals or politicians, whatever, and she is getting information to the Israeli army from her relationship with this Arab, whoever he may be. Is she allowed to engage in sexual relations with this Arab diplomat or general in order to get information to save the country of Israel?
Yes.
Absolutely, you're right. The Node to be Yehuda, I mean, I have a list, and they talk about this very specifically. Where is it? The Node to be Yehuda, Rav Kook, Rav Moshe Feinstein, the Klausenberger Rebbe, all agree in this case that Gilui Arayos, ad kedei kach, if the state of Israel's security is threatened, you got to do what you got to do. Which is, I mean, I don't know how many seminary girls will be in that role, but nevertheless, these are Jewish women who are serving the state of Israel. It's a fact. Again, I'm talking about halacha now. I'm not talking about hashkafa. Clearly, the Haredim have one issue which is legitimate. It's legitimate. The only issue that they have is that allowing all of their young men to serve in the army, encouraging them to serve in the army, might very well change their Haredi lifestyle. That's a legitimate fear. But now they have Haredi units, you have all male units. I mean, today is less of a problem. There's a famous American posek, Rav Greene, who was the one of the top students of Rav Moshe Feinstein. All right, you don't get more Haredi than that. He served in the IDF for 2 years. And he writes about it because he felt it was an obligation to do so. What's interesting is that poskim today, again, halachic poskim, the people that the Haredim are quoting are not necessarily accepted in the world of psak halacha. They might be Hasidic rebbes, they might be a rabbi who has some political connections, but these are not halachic gedolim in that sense. I don't mean to demean them, but they may be leadership of the Haredi community, but they're not people you go to for a psak halacha. And they can't quote halacha. They're quoting agaritas, they're quoting midrashim. Rav Kook also talked about the fact that yeshiva bachums will make the best soldiers. Looking at it from an historical perspective, the Jewish view is that you defend what's yours. In the beginning of Christianity, while the Jews were fighting against the pagans and the immoral Romans, Jesus and his ascetic cohorts who are wandering off in the desert, talking about pacifism and turning the other cheek. That's not the Jewish perspective at all. If somebody hits you, you hit them back. If your survival is at stake, you have to defend it. Wars are just, and they're moral, and they're meant to deter those that are out to destroy us. So it seems to be very clear. Now, why this has not been made public, you can imagine. If all the rabbis, if the rabbis came out with a psak to tell you that all cheeses in America are kosher, it would cause a revolution. All the kosher cheese manufacturers would be put out of business. If somebody came out, a reliable posting with a psak that every American yeshiva bachur has to go to serve in the IDF, it would cause a tremendous shockwave. But that apparently is the halacha. I don't see any way out of that. And I think poskim understand that. At a recent RCA convention, Rav Schechter says, yeah, that's probably the halacha. And in fact, because of his understanding that he arrived at lately, perhaps, his grandsons went into the army in Israel. Did the poskim come to this realization late? I mean, it was always there. It's a clear Rambam, and nobody at all argued with the Rambam. And if you look at Tanakh, those who didn't come to Israel's aid, even among the Shvatim, were cursed and criticized for it, and Devorah and so forth. The tribes that took their time to travel from the south up to the north the fight against the Assyrians were criticized. There's also another important area, a cognate area to the halacha, and that is Chilul Hashem. Chilul Hashem. Unfortunately, in 1948, there were maybe 400 boys learning in yeshiva when the state was proclaimed. And David Ben-Gurion, being the secular socialist that he was of the opinion that this phenomenon of boys sitting and learning in yeshiva is not going to last. The new Israeli reality of the pioneers and so forth, the kibbutzniks, so he exempted them from military service. But unfortunately, the 400 have grown now to how many hundreds of thousands. And unfortunately, it's more than a religious undertaking, it's become a political undertaking as well. Because unfortunately, those that learn, fine. But most of them are not learning. Most of them are not working. The Israeli government is held together by a very, very thin margin of far-right settlers and religious parties. Because if you don't get their support, you can't put together a government. It's a political reality. Netanyahu may not believe in the religious policies of the Haredi parties, but he needs them to keep his government together. He may not agree with all the Smotrich and all the other right-wing settler movements, but he needs them to stay in power. And the next election coming up in Israel, he may not get in, given what's going on now. So the Haredim, if they were a productive member of society, paying their taxes, working at jobs, they'd be regarded very differently. But unfortunately, I guess you can call it a parasitic relationship with the Israeli government. And if you give me what I want, we will vote for you in big blocks. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, contemporary posek who passed away a number of years ago, he says the main function of serving in the IDF is gemilas chesed, of doing the right thing, acting kindly towards your fellow neighbor. And to go one step further, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the Haredim don't quote this Gemara. Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Tes Zayin Amud Beis, person who sits and learns Torah and doesn't do chesed is deficient religiously. In other words, you're not frum if all you do is sit and learn and don't care about your fellow neighbor. And there's a tremendous shortage. 100,000 reservists are needed every day that they don't have. And people are away from home for months at a time. Jobs get disrupted, families get disrupted, children are born and don't see their fathers. I mean, on and on and on and on. And the Haredim are on the dole, so to speak. It's a political issue, but it's really a halachic issue. Again, Ravel Soloveitchik, the Chazon Ish, two great Haredi authorities are not quoted in their support of serving in the IDF. Okay.
What do you see for the future?
Okay, so again, the issue, as I said, is a very clear black and white halacha. Unfortunately, politics gets in the way. If all the legitimate Gedolim in America, the great Rosh Yeshiva, from the Aguda and the RCA and YU and all the big yeshivas, if they would all come out and say, it is our obligation to come to the assistance and the aid of the Israeli army, and all of our boys must join the army. Can you imagine the political fallout from that? The halacha is there. The Rabbanim know the halacha, but nobody talks about it. Hey.
Yeah, the devil's advocate with the ultra Haredim. You present the halacha. The halacha that the Rambam says is used Israel, it's got the Sanhedrin, it's got the Melech. Right. When the religious theocracy is in place, Everyone agrees.
Okay, so
The Haredim could say, they do say, a lot of them, is that this government does not have the qualities that the Rambam and all the halacha talks about.
except for the fact that all the contemporary 20th century Gedolim in Israel have agreed with Rav Kook and the Chazon Ish, who understand that the Knesset today in Israel has a din of Melech. That is the halacha.
Okay.
Again,
Did
the
Rav
Haredim
Shach-
don't accept that.
Did Rav Shach accept that? He was a big posek.
Yes, interesting.
Did Rav Moshe accept that?
I'll tell you a very quick anecdote.
Satmar Rebbe didn't accept that.
The Satmar Rebbe is an exception on many levels.
Also
Rav
big
Yehuda Amital, the founder of Gush Etzion, served in the Milchemet HaShiur, the War of Independence. And I had the opportunity to work with him for a number of years. And he is related. He's a cousin to Rav Shach. And when they were both alive, and Rav Amital was, a big Talmud Chacham, great posek, many Sfarim, Rosh Yeshiva, together with Rav Aaron Lichtenstein of Gush. Gush is like the Harvard of the yeshivas in Israel. And he was a Rosh Yeshiva. And at one point, he actually ran for Knesset to bring a Torah voice into the Knesset. And most religious rabbis try to avoid getting involved in politics, or certainly not in the Knesset, a person of his stature. Rav Shach at the time was still alive. And he was asked, what do you think about your cousin running for Knesset with his pro-Zionistic approach? And Rav Shach answered, which is very telling, in Yiddish, he says, Valarmentas of an emes. He really believes in this stuff. Implying that what Rav Shach may not have been agreeing with him, at least certainly not publicly. But he understood that Rav Amital, who was no neophyte, really understood the halacha, and he was pushing for the Mizrahi the way Mizrahi used to be. And he wanted people to be engaged in the state on all levels. Clearly, the Haredi issue is a social issue. It's a political issue, which obscures the halachic issue. So if someone were to say, on halachic grounds, can you defend any young man in Israel, outside of Israel, not serving in the IDF, halachically, it would be very hard to defend that. That's a halachic position. It's not widely talked about for political reasons. For political reasons. A lot of young men, what they call lone soldiers, go to Israel to serve in the army. Many, after studying in Israel for a year or two, join the army. Some remain there and settle in Israel. But again, if we truly believe that Israel's security is a mandate and an obligation, then you have to serve. These are all what the Rambam calls Milchemet Mitzvah. Bear in mind, Israel has to lose only once, and it's game over. Only once. They lose one war, they're finished. And that's why they fight so hard. And there are more and more, if you look at the command structure of the Israeli army, more and more of the command structure are wearing kippot srugot. They're products of the Hesder yeshivos. They made a career out of the army. And I just read in the paper this past week that one army base, a non-religious army base, just built a mikveh. Cheryl Halpern from Livingston donated a mikveh in memory of her late husband. Why? Because apparently some soldiers, religious, had a custom before they go to battle to go into mikveh. I never heard that before, but apparently they do that. So in one military outpost, not religious one, they now have a mikveh donated by the Halpern family in memory of Sam Halpern, all over Shalom. People are doing what they have to do. Again, This is the nexus of halacha and politics. If all the Gedolim were to come out and issue a psak, there'd be tremendous fallout. Tremendous fallout, and they may even risk their positions in saying it. Again, if they all came out and said, all cheeses are kosher, that would be less of a problem. But if they came out and said, all young men have to serve in the IDF, ooh, they lose their jobs? I don't know. But all I wanted to present today is the halakhic position. Nobody argues with the Rambam, period. And all the sources that the Haredim quote are midrashic or agadic, they're not halakhic. And even among their own Gedolim, if you press them, they would say, yeah, you probably should serve. So it's an unfortunate reality that politics gets in the way of halacha. And that could be a separate topic all by itself in many, many other different areas. But I wanted to share that. Now, why I didn't come up with this before is a good question. The same way I guess the Gedolim were not. I mean, I talked about war. I gave a number of shiurim on war. I still have my notes on it. In 1969, 1970. I gave in the middle of the Vietnam War, and I have a whole series of lectures on war in halacha. Mostly are based on the Rambam, the Gemaras. I mean, one of the greatest tragedies that we just finished observing was the death of Rabbi Akiva's students. Okay? Thousands upon thousands of Rabbi Akiva's students died. How did they die? In all probability, they were fighting in the Bar Kokhba rebellion against Rome. They were fighting in the Jewish army to preserve Jewish existence. Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, certainly on a higher level than those who were sitting in Bnei Brak or Meir Shiur. You go from there. But I never made the connection until recently that people not living in Israel should also serve in the army. The Torah doesn't exempt you based on geography. And that's a realization that I came to very recently. And I think people are starting to talk about it, but not loudly enough. I don't have an answer. Yeah.
So I don't talk about it now, but you have a young boy who went through yeshiva 12 grades, and he was top of his class in Gemara every year. Now he's whatever, 18, 19. He has one of two choices: either go to Eretz Yisrael to learn, or go into the IDF. And again, we're not talking about a slack; we're talking about a kid that has tremendous potential. Which one does he choose?
Say halachically, what he should do is go there to learn and then join the army. In all probability, or maybe the other way around.
Both, but maybe he should go learn first.
I don't know. I'm not opposed to it. Halachically, it would probably be to serve in the army first, I would think, because there are lives at stake. I mean, it's a difficult psak. It's a very difficult psak. But again, it's a halachic issue. Again, we are in Golos. We are spread out throughout the world. We're Jews all over the globe. It was different when everybody lived in Israel or in the area around Israel. But if Israel is threatened, if the very existence, it wasn't an issue until 1948. For 2,000 years, there was no Jewish state. There was no standing Jewish army from the year 137 until 1948. That's a lot of years. 137. The Common Era, after Bar Kokhba was defeated, until 1948, there was no standing Jewish army. So the halakha questions were not as real. And there's a lot of literature also about, avoiding service in the non-Jewish army. That's a whole separate issue. And there's a fascinating tshuva of Chafetz Chaim, who says that, that they didn't want to serve in the Russian army. And what some Shiva Bochner would do, they would cut off a finger, maim themselves, so they wouldn't be eligible for the draft because they couldn't pull a trigger of a gun. And the Chafetz Chaim says you're not allowed to maim yourself to avoid service. He didn't encourage them to serve in the army, but you don't maim yourself. So serving in the armies was always an issue on different grounds. Serving the non-Jewish army, the Chilul Hashem, and so forth. But now we have an Israeli army. We have a country to defend. And if, again, we fought long and hard to get the country after World War II, now that we have it, we can't lose it. As I said, Israel only has to lose one war, and it's game over. Yeah.
Personally, in your school in Passaic, do the Rebbeim share your view, and do you encourage parents and your students to consider this?
It would be suicide. It's very simply. This is not a point of view that is shared by people on the right. And people who are not on the right are reluctant to come out publicly.
Your school is not on the right of the right.
It's pretty far to the right. But Rav Schechter, as I said, mentioned it in passing, unofficially. He wasn't speaking, but he talked about it, I think, at a Q&A at an RCA convention last year. But it wasn't publicized for obvious reasons, because this would be a bomb. I mean, if the RCA and all the Gedolim in America and Europe would say every young man after high school has to go serve in the Israeli army, that would be a bombshell, even though halakhically it is probably the correct position. And it would solve the manpower shortage in Israel, put Israel in a much stronger position, and of course, probably increase Aliyah as well. All good things.
Rabbi Wally.
Yes.
So you brought me right to the only point I wanted to interject, and you said politically and the state. There are many Haredim, I'm not talking about Neturei Karta, there are many Haredi who still don't believe in Medinat Yisrael.
Yes.
They're not holding Dina Malchus Dina.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm excluding. Look, the Satmar Rebbe, even cast aspersions as to the Jewishness of those who were Zionists. He wrote a book in '67 after the war called Al HaGeula of Al HaTamura. It's a horrible book where he calls the victory of the Israelis in '67 the work of Satan, Ma'aseh Satan. Norman Lamb, Olav Shalom, wrote a critique on that book. But I'm excluding the Satmar. That's a whole separate parsha all by itself. But the Haredim are not necessarily Satmar Hasidim. There are people who like their way of life. They don't have to go to work. They live on the dole. Many of them are not productive members of Israeli society. Not everyone is learning. And it's very problematic because in order to stay in government, Netanyahu or whoever comes after him, if he wants the religious parties, he has to agree to keep on paying their welfare checks and supporting their community lifestyle. Again, the only legitimate concern that they have is that going to the army might change their way of life. It's a legitimate concern, I agree, but not overriding the halachic imperative. And that's a problem that Israel has to live with. And again, right now they're short 100,000 IDF soldiers. And the ones that are on duty and the reservists are there for a very, very long time. And jobs are interrupted, family life is interrupted. It's a very serious issue. And if more American and European, South American young men would volunteer to serve in the RDF, it would relieve that manpower shortage and put Israel in a much stronger position. Now, again, one caveat, and then I'll finish. I can understand and appreciate if you have young men who are really, really destined to become Gedolim. I mean, really, really destined to become. I can understand exempting them from the draft. I can understand that. But you don't have that many. Every yeshiva might have one or two really, really top-notch Talmudic scholars who have the potential to become great, great leaders in Israel. Those individuals, let them stay in yeshiva. But the vast majority, not in that category. So it's a problem. I hope the wars are ended, both in the north and in the south, with no loss, any more loss of Israeli lives, and that life can go back to whatever passes for normalcy in Israel. But clearly, this is an issue that is on the forefront. and nobody's talking about it. I mean, I'm talking about it. A few people in Israel might be writing articles about it. There's a very powerful article in the current issue of Hakira, which makes the same point. But other than that, nobody's talking about it, and there's no major push for this to happen.
Are there any statistics on the number of soldiers?
I can't hear you.
Are there any statistics on the number of lone soldiers that have gone?
Yes, there are quite a few lone soldiers. There are whole associations of lone soldiers.
So if they would not exist, then the 100,000 would be even a higher number.
Yes. I mean, the lone soldiers are very, very valued in Israeli society. People understand what they've given up to serve. And there are many, many civilian groups that support them, help them find jobs after they finish their service, help them find apartments to live in, because it's not always easy to do that on your own in Israel. So, yes, the lone soldiers are very, very much appreciated. And this applies to men as well as women. There are many women who volunteer, not only in the military, but also in the intelligence areas, where not necessarily combat soldiers, but they contribute to the war effort. It is very, very important. But as I say, it's an issue that has been raised. It's a lone, still voice, Kol Demo Daka right now. And I don't know if that's going to increase, if it's going to change. Nobody wants to see their young sons or grandsons go off to war. But halakhically, it's hard to defend. Why not? If Israel's existence is at stake, and it is. Okay, I'm sorry not to be more positive or optimistic. But the halacha is what the halacha is. He shem lai bara atov yad olam. Rosh kam mishalot v'chayinu. Who knows in lechem? So kill your long custom. Move to go. Tell me long custom. Shemo hadenu kihu azon v'neis lakol b'tiv lakol mechin mazon v'ol b'yasov Hashem bara l'nas hakol. Amen. No. Am rizcha shechasa. Oh no. Oder jetzt wie auch so Themen. Man. Amen. Amen. Very difficult topic.
Yeah.
Very frustrating. Nobody talks about it.
Question is,
They're afraid to talk about
was there any wars that Israel had that was really called any war?
No.
When they went into Lebanon?
because they were being bombed from Lebanon.
So just to get them before they get.
Interesting. I spent a lot of time in Nahariya. Nahariya is a town on the Lebanese border up north. All of the towns in Nahariya that are bordering Lebanon or bordering Syria, all these reserve soldiers are from the area right near the border. So if they have to be called up, they're there already. Okay? The chief rabbi of Nahariya, a graduate of Masad Harav Kook, long black coat, big black hat. He's a tank commander.
Wow.
Under his big black hat, kippah sruga. Doesn't speak a word of English. Graduate of Masad Harav Cook, but he's all the soldiers, all the reservists, are all